who's here live, as well as everyone who's joining us via Zoom. This is the first time I'm doing a hybrid event, so looking forward to it. Fingers crossed that everything goes well. I want to thank everyone for joining us because I know it's your lunch break, at least for those folks who are joining us here live. So that's I know you're giving up precious time, so I appreciate that. And also, just a heads up, this is going to be probably a different kind of session than some of the other sessions that you've been attending over the past few days of the Congress, in the sense that we very much hope that you're going to get a lot of practical tips and insights from Katie, from Martina, if I can add something. And because we're kind of an intimate group here, if you have kind of more individualized questions, we'll try and save time again for questions. So let's get started here. The topic for today is how to cut the time to publication in half. And I guess the inspiration behind this topic was really the fact that we see some authors that we work with, both on the publishing side as well as our company, which deals with author services, editing, translation, and help to scholars on the way to publication. Sometimes people get stuck in this loop, and it takes them years to publish their manuscript. And a book is a serious undertaking. There's no shortcuts, right, around doing serious research and working on your book. On the other hand, it doesn't always need to take as long as it does. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Martina, Julia, it probably most of the time takes more time than it needs to. So what we want to do today is to try and figure out how do you work efficiently, most efficiently, to get your book published. And this can be relevant whether it's your first book or whether it's your 100th book. So it really doesn't make much difference. So without further ado, I want to introduce Martina, who's here with us live. Martina's from Brill, Germany, and Katie Chen, who is here from Brill State, and she's stateside with us online today. So let's get started. Katie, can you move?
Hi everyone. Yeah. Good to see you this morning, or well, afternoon for you. It's very early here in the States.
Yeah, you can go ahead and take it from here, Katie. I think just move that to the next slide.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Brill Jewish Studies. So Martina and I both cover Jewish Studies. She does it for Brill Germany. I do it for Brill. So Martina will talk a bit more about what she does. What I do, this is just a little bit about our program. We average about 24 new book titles per year. We have 13 active book series that I'm responsible for. 4 journals specifically in the program that I run, but we also have 7 additional related journals. We cover a range of subfields and time periods. So all the way from ancient Israel through modern times, and really kind of cover the gamut of all of the different subfields within Jewish Studies. And now Martina's going to introduce the Brill Germany program a bit.
My name is Martina Kaiser. I'm a senior acquisition editor in theology and responsible for the theological program of Brill Schöning. And Brill Schöning is one of the imprints of Brill Germany. And I'm team leader academic publishing in Germany. So I coordinate the academic programs of Brill Germany publishing houses. So let me welcome you on behalf of the German part of Brill and thank you for being here. Brill has been very active in the German market for several years. Since 2017, the academic publisher Schöning, Fink and Mantis, located in the city of Paderborn, have been part of the Brill Group. And in 2021, Brill also acquired Pfannenhof und Ruprecht in Göttingen and Böhlau in Cologne. At Brill Germany, we publish in all fields of the humanities. We all know the slogan of Brill, Humanities Matter. But our particular programmatic focus is on theology, Jewish studies, history, art history, philosophy, and classical studies. We make our selections and evaluation of our work in cooperation with our series editors and the corresponding academic advisory boards. This means that all works we publish are peer-reviewed. The majority of the works we publish at Brill Germany are in German or English, but you also find Spanish, French, and Italian language works within our program. And we publish all works in print as well as in a digital version. For us, it is important to guarantee our authors as smooth as a production process as possible. And I think we are here to discuss how this works best. Let me also say some words to briefly explaining the Jewish Studies program of Brill Germany. Important scholarly works on Jewish studies can be found in all our imprints, but especially they are published by Font and Ruprecht, Böhlau, and Brill Schöning. In total, we have 15 Jewish studies series and 2 Jewish studies journals within our list. I would like to particularly emphasize the long-standing publishing cooperation between Font and Ruprecht and the Simon Buchner Institute for Jewish History and Culture. This famous Leibniz Institute is named after the Russian historian Simon Buchner, who was murdered in 1941 by the Nazis in Riga. The Institute conducts interdisciplinary research on Jewish life works and publishes all series with us. In addition, we see it at our publishing task to bring Judaism and Christianity into a scholarly dialogue. Here we have just founded a new series called Encounters Between Judaism and Christianity, in which German and English language works appear. Finally, significant individual works on Jewish history and religion also appear in our program. I would like to mention here the recently published work, Manage is Mine Alone, by the Israel historian Dina Horat. We have had this work about Abba Kofner and his group translated from Hebrew into German this spring. And there will be a session about this work here on the conference this afternoon, which I want to recommend you for joining. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martina. There's a page being passed around now for anyone who wants to receive the slides afterwards. Just mark your name down and we'll be happy to send them to you so you don't need to copy them. Yeah, so it's exciting. I think this is probably the first time Brill Germany has been at this conference, so it's great to have you. All right, so let's move right ahead into some of the more practical tips and tricks that can help us. So Katie, I think it's back to you.
Okay, so
just try and speak as loud as possible. It's a bit faint here, so just yeah.
Okay, sorry, I will do my best. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Martina mentioned a bit, it also applies to the Jewish Studies program that I run. Pretty much all of our books are published within series. And what that means is that we have editorial boards and editors who help us evaluate the content. And the editorial boards, if they're not reviewing the content themselves, they're recommending peer reviewers to help us evaluate the content. We try to do as quick a turnaround with this as possible. Usually that means that the peer review process takes about 2 to 3 months to complete. This is for the full manuscript. And then once the review is complete, revisions are made, and we start production. Production takes at most 6 months to complete. We have a dedicated Brill team that's focused on your project. it comprises myself as the acquisitions editor. I have an associate editor working with me who also helps with the process. And then you will have a dedicated production editor who will work on your project and help with the typesetting and the proofing and all of that. Brill, I'm sure you may know, is well known for our ability to handle unique fonts, and our typesetters therefore are well versed in dealing with unique fonts. We also have our own font called the Brill Font, which is free to download and can be used. But if you do, by any chance, have a unique font that is one that we're not familiar with, we just need the font to be a Unicode font. And that is for mostly because of our ebooks and everything like that, they need to be up to certain standards. We also have a marketing and sales team to place the volumes in the right institution. So our marketing and sales team is focused on selling subject area content to various libraries, but we also have things in place that can help you market your book, help us market your book individually, things like social media, e-newsletters, catalogs, conferences, things such as that. So these are kind of a snapshot of the services that we're providing to you when your book comes to Brill. So I'm going to move ahead now. All right, and now I think Avi is going to take over and talk a bit about ALE.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So just quickly, I'm the founder and CEO of Academic Language Experts. I don't think I introduced myself properly, but it's on statement. And we help scholars that are on their way to publication in two main ways. So the first type of help that we provide is language support. That includes translation, editing, proofreading, formatting. That's for journals, for book manuscripts, and so that's one side. The other side is publication support. So we help scholars who are applying for grant funding from different institutions. We help scholars who are writing a book proposal. They hope that's accepted by Katie and Martina, but they're not exactly sure how to put that all together and how to talk about the marketing side. That makes them feel uncomfortable with that. We help more junior scholars with academic coaching. So if you're struggling with writer's block, or you want to get past some sort of issue that you're having with your writing, we can help you in that regards as well. So really anything that has to do with academic writing. So quickly, we focus on humanities and social sciences. We do have a STEM division, but our bread and butter is humanities and social sciences. These are books, articles, grant proposals. We have a freelance team of over 3,000 translators, editors, and reviewers, which enables us basically to match a real expert in your field to your specific project, which really makes a big difference because without a deep understanding of your domain, you may end up with a translation or an edit which is really off and you need to start over from scratch. We work in all major field languages and fields. Don't be shy to test us. I know some people work in very niche places, and we do our best to assign the real expert in your field. We believe in a quality first approach, so that means that we really don't take any shortcuts. Every project that we work on has two people involved. It's got either a translator, an editor, and a proofreader, an indexer, and a reviewer. There's always two steps to make sure that nothing is missed along the way. And that actually can, save a lot of time when you're working on a book, because if you work, you decide to do it yourself, and maybe it's not, English is not your mother tongue, or if you get someone who's not really understand the field, you may submit it and then they may turn around and say, well, you really need to do more work on this before it's ready. And you're kind of going through this cycle, which you don't want to do. We have dedicated project managers to work on projects. And for those who aren't familiar, we have a monthly publication success interview series where I interview heads of major publications. We've had the head of NYU Press. We've had an event with Katie on how to prepare your book manuscripts, which is really great. So I invite you to Google that and check that out, because it's an hour of jam-packed with really helpful information. So that's just kind of all in one line. We've got to stand here, so anyone wants to come as well, just stop by. Katie, can you move to the next slide, please? So our major services are editing, translation, formatting, indexing, helping you prepare your book proposal, and as well as grant proposals. So really anything that falls under the big umbrella of academic writing, that's how we can help. All right, so now we're going to get into the kind of, no, I think go back, Katie, I think, paralegal pro number 3. So now we're really going to get into the kind of nitty-gritty about, maybe just click on it, there you go.
Yeah, sorry.
The nitty-gritty about how to actually take time on your proposal. So Katie, back to you.
Okay. So there are a few different ways that you can kind of optimize the time to publication. And because, from our side, Brill will do our best to move things along as quickly as possible. But there are most of the times where Brill can't control, the time frame is time when the author is working on various parts of the project. So the first one is to write a strong proposal. This can include a cover letter, kind of giving an overview, a planned table of contents, and chapter abstracts are helpful. A sample chapter is helpful, but not, not always necessary, but helpful. A prospectus and a CV. And so including all of these pieces that really give us a good idea of what your project is about, how you're going to structure it, all of those things help us, because then, it leaves less questions when we're showing it to the series editors. We don't have to go back and forth saying, oh, can you clarify this or give us more information about that? So having a strong proposal will help cut down the time in terms of when we get a preliminary decision from the series editors. And I will say that once we have a preliminary decision from them, if it's like, yes, we're interested in seeing this project, we can do a provisional agreement at that point. The agreement being provisional until the full manuscript undergoes and passes peer review. Secure funding in advance.
Can I just interject and ask you a few sentences about the prospectus, because I think that maybe some scholars aren't exactly sure what that covers.
Yeah, so a prospectus would be basically I would say like a 1 to 2 page summary of your project. What is the main point that you're trying to get across? What is the research that you're focusing on? Basically, think of it like an abstract for a journal article, but putting it into a book. So it's going to be a bit longer than an abstract for a journal article would be. But basically kind of a brief snapshot of the work and what you want to accomplish with the book. So going ahead, so talking about securing funding in advance, this can be funding to cover things like the editing services that Avi's company does. It can be funding if you'd like to publish the book in open access. Perhaps it's funding to, if you have a lot of images and you need to be obtaining permissions for those images, if you need funding for that. But if you have funding in hand, when you come to us first, for various things that you want to do with the book, obviously that saves time down the road. 3, getting reviewed. So this is, I believe, getting reviewed is in regards to the proposal, or Avi, was that meant more for having a colleague review it?
Yeah, I think it's important, like before you submit it to the, publisher.
Yeah. So sometimes it helps to have a colleague take a look at your proposal, just to have a fresh set of eyes, because they may find that they have questions about certain things that you might need to clarify in your proposal. And this, again, will save time later, because if you've already kind of addressed those issues up front, then it's less likely that the series editors or I may have questions about it. Finding a series, as I've mentioned a few times now, pretty much everything is published in a series. So if you have a particular series in mind, that helps us, simply because then I don't have to read through the whole proposal and try to figure out in which series I think it would best fit. You can, when we talk about finding a series, you can think about, if you've used Brill books in the past, maybe there's a particular series that you've used more in your research. You know, is there a book that you keep going back to over and over again? Because that, chances are, if you've been using it in your research, it would be an appropriate place for your own work to appear. Working on the contract. So like I said, we'll send out a provisional agreement when, you know, once the proposal has been approved. And we have a standard agreement. The points in it are negotiable. So certainly feel free to read through it and come back to us with questions or items that you may want to adjust. But, you know, the quicker that we settle the terms, the quicker the contract can be signed. And finally, prepare a list of tasks for the final manuscript. So we do have an extensive author guide that details all of the pieces that you'll need for your manuscript. And while it may be overwhelming, it may also be helpful to read through it and kind of take out the highlights of things that you know that you need to focus on for your particular project. But also, you know, we here, the team at Brill that's working on your project is here to help. And if you have any questions of pieces that you might need or things that you're concerned about, we're happy to answer them at any point. And I will say too, that once we get the final manuscript, the associate editor will be going through the full manuscript and checking to make sure that we have all the files, we have all the images, we have all the pieces, you know, everything lines up. But certainly if you kind of have a checklist to make sure that you have all the pieces in place before you hand it over, it's less likely that we'll have to be going back and forth finding missing pieces. So go ahead now to manuscript preparation. I'm going to let Avi talk a bit about the language work.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
As you said, there's kind of back and forth here between the work that you're doing with the publisher and the work that you know, you may be doing with us or with other what are known as author editing services, which are services that help you really get your manuscript ready, because publishers as a whole, and it really depends on which publisher, publishers as a whole are doing less and less in-house developmental copy editing, and really leaving that to scholars to figure out on their own. Obviously, you're going to want to speak with your institution and see what funding is available to you for that. But here's some tips and tricks to kind of get you started with that. To be clear, you don't need to have the full book ready in order to submit a proposal. You can submit a proposal and then kind of be working on different parts of your book. So these two processes that what Katie is describing, what I'm about to talk to you about, can't possibly happen in parallel. You can be working on both things. In fact, I recommend not to wait until you have the full book to send a proposal, but actually get Katie and or whatever publisher you're choosing involved at an early stage so that you can get some feedback and you can see what's interesting to you. You might know what's interesting to them, or how they want you to set up the project. So communicate. I know Brill and Ailey, we partner and we work together. In fact, scholars get discounted services from working with us on their Brill projects. And the extra editors, all of them that I've met a few dozen, are lovely and really helpful. And I think sometimes authors get afraid, like, I can't admit that there's something I don't know, but that's really not true. I think that they would prefer you to ask more. Obviously, read through the website, do your own homework, but they prefer for you to ask intelligent questions as opposed to just being shy and saying, I'm not sure. And that's why they're here at the conference as well. So, to language work. So if you're going to translate, okay, so you wrote your doctorate or your original manuscript in German, in French, in Hebrew, in Arabic, okay, you want to translate it. So I recommend, if you're going, whether you're going from your dissertation to a book, or if you're going, let's say you publish your book in Hebrew and now you want to translate it to English, go over it again one more time, or 2, 3 more times with a critical eye, and ask yourself, is everything that's in my original manuscript relevant and appropriate for the English manuscript? Because it may not, or for the German manuscript, if you're going from English to German, right? It may not. You have to think about the local audience and the local crowd and what they want to see and what they don't want to see. So, of course, first of all, for dissertation, you're going to need to do a lot of cutting, right? You're going to need to cut a lot of the literature review. You need to cut some of the methodology sections. You need to tighten it up. You're going to need to answer the golden question of, who cares, right? Why is this important beyond the 2 or 3 people that are my mother and my dog and my colleague at the university? Who else is going to care about this book? Because journal articles, you can publish something very esoteric and something that's very just kind of like only interests a few people, that's okay. With books, it's not. There needs to be some audience. It doesn't necessarily need to be massive. But there needs to be a group of people who are going to be interested and curious. And you're going to need to explain to Katie or to one of her colleagues who that group is and why they're interested. So back to the language writing. You may want to review, maybe edit is too strong a word, but you're going to want to review and think about, okay, how is the local audience going to get this? Are there concepts in my initial manuscript that are clear to that audience, but may not be clear to my new audience? Or the opposite. Are there things that I didn't explain when I was writing in Hebrew, but now that I'm moving over to English, I didn't need to explain that and think about that. So don't just do copy and paste and acceptable. Be realistic in terms of timeline for work. So we get asked all the time, how long, what's your deadline? Our general recommended, we did a mini study in-house to see what's the best, sort of timing for translation for editing. We generally recommend between 500 and 600 words per day for translation and 650 to 800 words per day for editing. Okay, those are very general numbers, but that essentially means if you have a 10,000 word article and you want to edit it, so it's going to be about 8 days. And translation would be somewhere more like 12, 13, 14 days. So obviously in a book, that's going to take longer. Make sure to give it the time that it needs. If you took 3 years to do your research, 2 years to write it out, and a year to defend it, don't give 2 days to the translator editor to work on it. I know that we're all under pressure. We all want to get that job or get that promotion, and that's good. The more organized we are about how we give it. And by the way, we don't necessarily need that. It leads me to my next one. You don't necessarily need to wait till the very end to give it to the translator editor. You do want to make sure that the chapters that you're sending to them are finished, are polished, are finalized. But you don't necessarily need to finish the entire book before starting that process. So those are some things to keep in mind. Other tips that can kind of help you with this process. So if you're doing translation, think ahead and try to if you know that there are key terms that are going to come up, 500 times in your manuscript, but they're very, niche specific. So even though, the translators that we're working with really do understand the field, if you know you want to use the term, put it in already in brackets. Make sure that, the translator knows exactly kind of which terminology. Make a glossary ahead of time so they know what key terms you want to use because they're important to the field. Aside from that, understand that you're going to be involved. At least, the scholars that the best works that we do are ones where there's a dialogue, where there's communication, where we will send a draft, and then they will come back with and generally we have comments, questions, suggestions, and then they'll come back with their responses and and questions back for us. And there's a little bit of ping pong back and forth before it's ready to go out. That communication creates a text that's greater than our work or your work because it's putting everything together. So allow time for that. And make sure you're asking Katie or the other acquisition editors in touch with what their annual publishing schedule is, right? So there might be a certain time period where most of the books are being produced. So on one hand, that way you can kind of work backwards, right, in the process. You understand the steps of the process and say, okay, well then I know I need to have the proofs. I need to have the proofs by this date. I need to have an index on the proofs by this date. Before that, I'm going to need to make sure that everything's edited before that, right? So you can work backwards and kind of build yourself a schedule. And like I said before, you can submit, in chunks. I wouldn't submit 2 pages at a time. That can get really frustrating, and it's important for the translator or the editor to have context to understand what you're working on. So don't submit chapter 8 and then chapter 3 and then the introduction, because that could be, that can be hard for us. Unless it really stands on its own. If it stands on its own, then fine. But if it's, kind of you need to understand the previous chapters, so keep in mind that that's going to be important for your language help as well. So that's kind of some of the main tips that I would say that tend to hold up these kind of projects, and it takes time. It takes time from authors, even if you are paying to do that. The end result, I think, very well justifies it. Keep in mind how many times you can be doing this process in your life. 4, 5, 6. Prolific writers maybe get up to 10 books. So I know there's this pressure to always be publishing as quickly as possible, but actually, if you take the time to do it right, the results can be can really make a difference. All right, let's go ahead to post translation, post editing translation steps. Okay. Great. Back to you.
Yeah. So this is kind of after The editing work is done with Avi and it comes back to Brill. So these are points at which you can kind of optimize your time to help the process move along more quickly. So the first thing to consider is time for revisions after the peer review is complete. So once you send in the manuscript, we know that the peer review is probably going to take about 2 to 3 months to complete. So look at your schedule about 2 to 3 months out from when you send the manuscript to us for review, and see if you can set some time in your schedule to start working on the revisions. Now, again, this is a point at which we don't necessarily set the schedule. We say to you, okay, well, here are the points that you need to work on. You let us know when you think the revisions will be complete. So if you've already built in time to make those revisions, chances are they'll move along more quickly than if you're trying to kind of fit it in among other projects or commitments that you have. The second item is to use the time when the manuscript is being reviewed to work on obtaining permissions and high resolution images. So if you are including images in your work, or if you're including long quotes of text, things like that you need to obtain permissions for, it would be good to start that process earlier rather than later, because then you'll have the permissions in hand and you won't have to be doing it at the 11th hour, and it helps move things along, again, getting us the final manuscript to start production, because we can't start production until you've obtained permissions and high resolution images if you are including images. Now, the resolution requirements for images are all, we'll give you that information so that you can make sure that you're getting, we're not going back and forth trying to find better versions of images. If you are doing an edited volume, if you are the editor of an edited volume, check on your contributors, making sure that they have obtained permissions and images for their chapters. Also, we have a consent to publish form that contributors need to sign that basically just says, yes, I want my work included in this book. So making sure that they've signed that, because these are all pieces that, again, we need complete before we can start production. And you can use the time when the peer review is happening to kind of get these, what I like to call, kind of housekeeping items or administrative items settled so that you don't have to worry about them later. Finally, or point number 4, all content and editing needs to be complete before production, which I think seems obvious given what we're talking about, but basically you need to know that when we talk about the proof stage after typesetting, we're talking about finding minor typos or errors in the work. We're not talking about, moving paragraphs and rewriting sentences and all of that. All of that should be complete before we start production. And the reason for that is that if there are major changes made during the proofing, we're essentially having to retypeset things. Things that change pagination means that our typesetters have to go back in and repaginate anything after those changes. So really concentrate on making your content final before you give it to us. Point 5, again, similar to scheduling time for revisions, schedule time for proofs. Once your book is turned over to production, the dedicated production editor for your project will send you an email and we'll give you a detailed schedule of when the first proofs will be in, how long you'll have time to review the proofs, things like that. So once you get that, again, set aside time in your schedule for when the proofs are coming so that you can hopefully have a quick turnaround. Because again, if the proofs are delayed on your side, it's not something that we can make up. We can't make up that time later. So, our processes take a certain amount of time. So if it takes longer for proofs, then it will take longer to get the book out. While the proofs are being prepared, use the downtime of that to start preparing your index. So we ask authors to provide an index once they get first proofs. The reason why we wait until that point is because at that point, the pagination will be set for the book. But when we talk about index preparation, the easiest way that I can explain it is to take each chapter and think about your key terms for each chapter and use that as the basis of your index. So when we talk about doing key terms for journal articles or things like that, same idea, but doing it on a chapter by chapter basis. If, excuse me, if it's an edited volume, have your contributors send the key terms for their chapters, and that can be the basis of the index. But we do also, if you choose, we do also have indexing services, but those come with a cost. So that's something to consider too. We do have freelancers that we work with, but again, that may be something that, perhaps you obtain funding for or something like that, but it's not something that we provide automatically. So moving ahead, we're going to go into a bit of information about ALE and Brill and our partnership that we have, and I'm going to let Avi take it from here.
Yeah, thanks for and you're also welcome to use our help for indexing services as well. In terms of the so we've been doing partnering with Brill and all sorts of marketing and publication initiatives over the last few years. I don't know if any of you attended our Zoom sessions with Katie and with Stephanie. With Katie, we talked about how to actually put together a book management is going to interest the publisher. How do they actually make a decision? We've had over 1,700 people register for that event. It was a really big success. I recommend Googling it online and seeing, and you can just watch it at your convenience. But that really, today we're going through like the technical parts of the process, but not how we're not really delving into like how the publishers make their decisions about what to take and what not to. So that's really valuable. And then anyone who's curious about open access, let's read that thrown around that doesn't know what the hell it means. I recommend checking out the interview with Stephanie, who is the head of open access at Brill. Also really enlightening and interesting. So those are some of the previous things we've done, and we were proud to announce that 6 months ago a official partnership with Brill. So that means that scholars who use our services receive a discount for working with us on their Brill manuscripts.
Yeah, I guess this is just going more into showing that. Sorry, I guess I should have been doing this as we're talking. Moving it ahead.
You would search on YouTube.
Yeah, so first of all, you can just go onto our channel, Academic Language Experts, and you'll find the videos there. Katie Chin, who's with us today, she's the one who I interviewed first, and then Stephanie Paul-Bast, that's Paalvast, is the second. So you're welcome to search both of those.
I believe those videos are also posted on Brill's blog, and I can get the link, and that can also be sent around with slides if people are interested afterwards.
Yeah, there's a sign up registration form. Got it? Okay. Raise your hand if you haven't yet gotten it. Okay, so pass that along, and I'll send everything in one email on it, so you don't need to worry. Make it easy for you. Yeah, brilliant. You'll just have to give me time to finish up, and I'll get that out to you. All right. Yes. So let's talk about just for a minute, the different services and the discount pricing you can benefit from. So first of all, just in terms of how pricing works for our services, so we have individualized price quotes depending on complexity, languages, the timeline, formatting requirements. But Brill authors across the board receive a 10% discount on editing, 5% discount on translation. And if you do have access to university funds, you can use those to help pay for some of the services. We're a registered supplier at hundreds of universities around the world, and it's not hard to get to that many places. It might be a little bit small here, but you can kind of see our standard price range and our price range for working with Brill authors. So translation editing is generally between 15 and 18 euro cents per word. You can convert that into whatever currency is relevant for you. Editing and proofreading is between 5 and 8 euro cents per word, and indexing depends on the length of the manuscript. Additional fees may apply to it's very complex, super rush project or other special requirements. But this is kind of, if you just want to get a general impression of, well, how much am I going to have to ask an institution for, or what should I, if I need to apply for funding, post it. I will also try and send around, if I remember, when I send the follow-up email, a list of funders that we put together who help cover translation and related costs. You know, just like everything in academia, you need to apply, you need to win, but at least it's you know, not coming out of your pocket. All right, yeah, let's move ahead, Katie. So in terms of just kind of how we work, we've got, you know, every project that we, you know, accept is allocated to a specific account manager who is available to you via Zoom, email, phone, and you can speak with them about your project, which is really helpful because the dialogue really makes a difference in terms of the final product. There's, you know, we try to get back to everyone within 24 hours, which is not easy during the conference, but we do our best. Customer support in all sorts of different languages, English, French, Russian, Hebrew, German, and you know, hopefully that will expand over the next month. We translate in all major languages, but this is kind of, you know, if you want to speak in your own mother tongue, and you feel more comfortable, then you can choose that. The pricing, you know, and workflow, there's a centralized portal to work from, and we'll share shortly how you can benefit from the link to benefit from the discount. And we support you throughout the entire process. So if you know, if you want feedback on your proposal, or if you're not sure exactly whether a question is appropriate or not appropriate for the, you know, for the publisher, or you know, you want to consider different publishers, want to get our feedback on that, I'm happy to do so. Like I said, I will be, you know, at the booth for the next day and a half, going to the conference together with my colleague Lee Ron, who's with us today. And you know, so this is a great time to pick our brains about projects that you're working on. You're also welcome to be in touch afterwards with any questions. All right, so before we open it up to questions, here's you know, our contact info up on the screen here. You're really more than welcome to purchase any, you know, kind of follow-up inquiries. You're also welcome to ask them now, but if it's something, you know, you think is more personal or private or more specific to your project, you're welcome to reach out to us by email. I will send around these links, the Brill link to the Jewish Studies. You can also just Google Brill Jewish Studies and come up very quickly. If you're, by the way, if you're maybe on the board of Jewish Studies in other fields, you may want to ask Katie whether she's the best person to handle your project. Maybe there's other acquisitions that are there, but you can definitely, you know, aim you in the right direction. And then at the bottom, you see there is a special ALE Ackling partner page with Brill, which I don't think I can click on, otherwise I would know. But I can try and bring that up in a minute. And you can basically go in there to get the discounted pricing on Brill services. So I think that brings us to the end. You're welcome to follow us, Katie and myself, on socials, as well as our companies. So, you know, if you're a Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm most active personally on LinkedIn, but we've got a company account on Twitter. So follow us, you get updated with like all the endless educational opportunities, free educational webinars and workshops that we do. So you know, definitely tap into that, especially if you're junior scholars. And I want to, you know, open it now up to the crowd, whether it's with us personally or virtually. This is your opportunity to kind of pick the brain of two, you know, senior, probably combined, I don't know what, 50 years, 60 years of experience with publishing books. So this is your time to kind of ask your own personal questions. I think Martina and Katie are more than qualified to respond. So yeah, did we lose our virtual? No. Okay, Katie, can you go back to sharing the screen?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No, that's all right. No worries. It's just that's the only way we can see it.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought there we go. Okay, is that better?
Your name and what your
I'm Roberta Sabbath from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. You do indexing, you said it's one of your services. So is there, you'll include the fee maybe for that when you set up the slide, or do I just email you individually?
I can share, if folks are interested, I'm happy to share the pricing page where you've got everything organized there.
Okay, great, because the indexing has to come really pretty quickly once you get there's that moment. So it'll be great to have the contact.
You're preaching to the choir. It's it's definitely, you know, it's a quick, it's hurry up and wait is kind of, or you know, wait and then hurry up is kind of the way that we see it. You know, but to be honest, you know, you have to have some sort of, you know, structured timeline in mind for yourselves if you're going to be successful posting a book. If you're not strict, you know, and if you don't do it in an organized manner, it's just, I've seen book projects that have just gone on for years and it's just, okay. Do you have a follow-up?
Oh, yeah, and then do you like have a consultation service or you just like an hour, like say on any idea, whether it's a book proposal, a funding proposal, indexing idea, do you have hourly conversations that you, consulting sessions?
So I can speak for myself and maybe I'll let Martina and Katie speak for themselves, but I could say that for us, we do have paid hourly consultation outside of the Congress. At the Congress, we're doing it for free. So stop by and happy to chat about, you know, whatever kind of issues are top of mind for you now. So,
more or less just to know for the future.
Yeah, but for the future, you can schedule a paid consultation with one of our publication experts. But what would you say, Martina?
We need a proposal first from the author. That is the first step in the publishing process. And we give consultation how to do it by email, what we want. And we don't want the whole manuscript at the beginning, but a table of contents, 2 pages about about the issue and something about yourself. And that's the first step. And then we consult you step by step.
Oh, so maybe I misunderstood then. I thought Ailey was an independent entity that also does work with Brill.
That's correct.
So I'm not talking about a specific book. It could be just, I say I have a concept and I want to know, should I apply to this big grant service or that? So it isn't in connection with Brill proposal. It's an independent.
That's correct.
Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, so I'll try and clarify. Yes, first of all, we are 2 independent entities that are partnered, you know, for the benefit of authors. But there's no, you know, it's not the same company. In terms of the publishers, the acquisition editors of the different publishers, they're happy to help you develop your manuscript, but your time is limited. They have a lot of authors they work on, and you may need help even before you're ready to approach them. So that's kind of where we come in at parts of the process which aren't directly related to the book. We just want to understand kind of how things work. Like you said, having to do grant proposals. That's kind of where we fit in a bit more. And you know, today we've been talking a lot about kind of books, focusing on books, which is obviously why people are here. But you can consult with us about your grant proposals or about your journal articles or anything surrounding academic writing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We had a question in the chat that's actually directed more towards Martina. So the question was whether we have PhD funding or to publish a PhD dissertation with Brill. Do we need to? Who do we contact for that? So yeah, that's for Martina because we, at least with my list at Brill, we don't publish straight dissertations. We publish revised or dissertations that have been revised into monographs. But if Martina can comment on the Brill Germany side of things.
We publish PhD works, but we have our series editors, and the series editors decide if the work can be published as it is, or if you have to do work on it. And our series editors are the decision makers about your work, and they say how it will go on.
Yeah, but I do think that if you also, in addition to what Martina said, if you have specific questions, like please feel free to reach out to Martina or myself via email. You know, and we're happy to kind of help answer questions that way as well. So,
Before we anything on your end, Katie?
No, yeah, so there was another question if our main concerns is Jewish studies or other fields as well. So no, Brill publishes in all fields of the humanities, so we're not specifically limited to Jewish studies. It's just that my particular area of responsibility within Brill is for Jewish studies and also ancient Near Eastern studies. But if you have a proposal in a different area, that's fine. We do have on our website on brill.com, we do have a list of all of our acquisitions editors and the various fields for which they're responsible. So you can kind of go on there and see who you need to contact, but also if you send it to somebody within Brill and maybe it's not the right person, we will forward it along to the right person within Brill.
The same between Germany and the Netherlands and US, because
Yeah.
we put the series of each other, and sometimes we gave a project to the Netherlands, which didn't fit into our program, and the other way around as well.
And
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and goes for us in terms of areas of, especially we're here at Jewish Studies Conference and we do Jewish Studies work, but that's not exclusive. We work in all major fields. All right, I think that brings us to the conclusion. I want to give a special thanks to Katie because Katie, what time is it now for you? It's now 7:30, but she started out
Now 7:30 in the morning, yes.
early in the morning. I don't even know, did you get your coffee in before we started? I'm not even sure.
I did, yes. I've been working on it while we've been here, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, Katie wasn't able to join us live as we had hoped, but we appreciate her waking up super early and for Martina for rearranging her schedule for joining us. So yeah, thanks for taking your lunch break, and hopefully you learned something over the last hour. And like we said, we're here, so feel free to comment and chat. Have a great day.